Hello, welcome back. It's Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony. Good to see you. It's actually Thursday, July 4th, 2019. So 4th of July here in the US. That's a holiday. And if you're not in the US, happy holiday anyway, right? Anyway, so today what I want to do is a lot of energy going on. It's July. I mentioned in my last video a few months ago that I'd be back for July. Why? Because we got 2 eclipses and a Mercury retrograde coming up this month. And we actually had the first eclipse 2 days ago on July 2nd. It was a solar eclipse in Cancer, and we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to have a lunar eclipse, in Capricorn on the 16th of July. And in the midst of that, Mercury turns retrograde this Sunday on the 7th of July, and it'll turn direct with the new moon in Leo on July 31st. So the entire month of July, right from the very beginning to the end, is covered with these eclipses and the Mercury retrograde. And of course, I also want to give some more anecdotes relative to the themes for this year. If you remember back in my previous videos for 2019, the disclosure and zealotry of 2019. This is with the Jupiter in Sagittarius squaring Neptune in Pisces, and this is definitely playing itself out. So why don't I address that first before I get into these eclipses. And these eclipses are a precursor to what's coming in 2020. In early 2020, we're going to see Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto all together in Capricorn, so we'll get to that in a second. But these eclipses are highlighting a lot of that energy. But back to the themes for 2019, just to keep us up to speed. I've mentioned some previous examples in previous videos for how that Jupiter square Neptune is playing out with the zealotry and disclosure, etc. But I think the biggest example, the best example right now, if you're not familiar, is what's happening with social media like YouTube, for example, Twitter, that are being not forced, but encouraged to censor or at least diminish the power and the viewability of some of the people on their platform. And this, of course, is outside of the realm of really their jurisdiction, and they're only doing it because of the sponsors and the corporate influences that are saying, okay, we got people with a problem with what you're saying or what you're presenting, and so we need you to take some action, even though there's no actual rules violated. This is a perfect example with YouTube. There's several sites that have been at least targeted for demonetization. If you're not familiar, YouTube does allow you to make money. I don't make money off my channel. I don't qualify, whatever the qualifications are. But people that have been making money off of their YouTube channel, that relying on it in certain aspects, the advertising dollars being demonetized. So essentially just pulling the rug out from underneath certain providers of information. And YouTube, Twitter, these entities should be operating more like AT&T or other providers of information do, in that there should be no bias, no regulations on who says what. It's just a platform for what you can say. People are allowed to disagree with what is said, of course, but the idea of censoring it is very, and on this 4th of July, it's very un-American, right? This is taking away liberty from those individuals that might have opinions that differ from you, me, or anybody else. And everybody, if you live by the philosophy of the United States of America, should be at least allowed to speak. Freedom of speech. And we are sovereign human beings with the ability to filter out what we don't want to hear, to disagree with what we hear, and to choose not to engage with individuals that we don't agree with. That is part of our freedom as well. And so there should, relative to this philosophy, there's no need for a policing agent of any kind. And that's essentially what's happening here. YouTube, as an example, acting almost like a policing agent, a publisher, in essence, deciding what goes through and what doesn't go through its feed. And that's outside of their jurisdiction and outside of the realm of liberty. Okay? And how this plays out with the Jupiter-Neptune square is fairly obvious. I mean, the Jupiter-Sagittarius side of that, the zealotry. I mean, this is basically, if you're censoring someone, you're basically saying what I'm saying is okay and what you're saying is not okay, and you're judging and saying what is right and what is not right. That's zealotry in its purest form right there. And what's also interesting is the disclosure side of this. And you might not immediately see it, but if you think about it, it's sort of disclosure by omission, in that, while a lot of right-wing conservative sites were targeted, that wasn't the only thing, or the only type of entity that was targeted by the censorship. Some of it was very bipartisan and non-political, but it was information, like, for example, sex trafficking and things of that nature, that isn't really blaming one party or another, or looking at it as a partisan thing, but just seeing it as an issue, and this being just kiboshed, essentially. And a lot of sites that weren't political were also targeted by the censorship and by the demonetization and whatnot. And it's sort of like they took an opportunity to cut out some sites that they didn't want seen. And that omission of information essentially is disclosure. Why would they have to get rid of it if it wasn't true, right? You only have to get rid of information that is true if it goes against what you're trying to portray as your image, whatever that may be. So the omission of information is somewhat of an admission and a disclosure of some of that information perhaps being at least leaning toward some kind of truth, some kind of revolution or awakening. Okay, doesn't mean that everything that's on any of these sites that get targeted is all true, but the idea is there was a window open to go in and essentially hack down a bunch of sites, and with that opportunity came other sites that weren't traditionally classified as political and things like that. Because I'm not going to get into the right versus left wing and the bias in the media, etc., like that. But yeah, the point being, information is information, no matter who it comes from. Russia, Mars, or the Andromeda galaxy, or whatever. It doesn't matter where information comes from. We are the sovereign individuals with the responsibility to process it, period. We're not children. And if we are children, then we need an entity. We need a parent entity to govern and direct and block information for us and provide information for us and everything else. But if we actually are going to live according to the philosophy of liberty, we should take responsibility for our sovereign selves and our sovereign authority, and decide for ourselves what we think is true. And we shouldn't be blocked from any kind of information, okay? So this leads me into the eclipses and the Mercury retrograde, etc. Okay? I'll talk about the Mercury retrograde first. Mercury, as you know, goes retrograde every few months. And it entered its shadow, I believe, right around the summer solstice, June 21st-ish. It will be in that shadow zone right on through mid-August. But the retrograde period will start this Sunday, July 7th, and last through July 31st. Okay? And it's going to start at about 4 degrees Leo in an exact conjunction to Mars in Leo. And then it's going to back up to about 24 degrees Capricorn and then move forward again. So it's going from Cancer, not Capricorn. It's going from Leo back into Cancer, where it will then turn direct on July 31st. But the strong, potent part of this is the fact that it's connected with Mars. Mars, a very fiery energy, Leo, a very fiery energy, and here we are, Mercury with Mars in Leo, and then it has to go backwards. So there's a sense of, on a personal level and a collective level, that there's this sort of message that wants to come out, and that Leo energy of the lion, it's like that roar, and the potential, if we come out with our truth message, or what we really need to say or feel needs to be said now, it may be too much in our heads and not enough in our hearts. And that's what this pullback into Cancer is all about. So our message is strong. that part is clear. No one's going to argue with the fact that we have a strong message. The idea is, can we deliver that message in a way that's digestible and that's coming from the heart, and not just sort of a head-based checkmate kind of energy, which leaves nobody the winner, really, okay? And so that's the energy of this summer, essentially, from now through the middle of August, is we're starting to feel this sense of, like, we know what needs to be said. There's something out there that's not being said correctly. We want to deliver it, or someone in our personal lives, we feel like we need to say something. on this collective level. There could be, you know, actions by nations and whatnot that they really want to take action on, but it's not the best time, okay? It's time to pull back, make sure that it's really coated in the heart of the matter. We could extrapolate this to, like, say, Trump's chart, for example, of, you know, president of the U.S. This conjunction happens in his 12th house. That's the hidden area aspect. And when we get to Labor Day, which is the first few days of September, this is when a lot of this energy is going to culminate. Okay, so we have a 2-month period here of building up that message and then taking the action. But the action is more digestible and more aligned with the heart. The United States of America has the sun in Cancer, obviously July 4th, right? Sun is in Cancer right now. And so this kind of plays into the country, and then also Trump's chart, because Trump has that going on in his 12th house, so it's behind the scenes, essentially. What's happening this summer is behind the scenes. What happens around Labor Day, when Mercury, now direct, will join the sun and Mars again, but in Virgo. So again, the first couple of days of September. So Mars, Mercury, and the sun in Virgo. This is when that digestible message can really have an impact. Okay, it can really be a lot, you know, put into a logical form. All right, and so for the U.S., for example, if this is, you know, looking at Trump as the leader of the country, etc., that Mars-Mercury Sun conjunction happens in his first house. So now it's out in the open. It goes from the background to the open. So there is some sense of action wanting to be taken that is going to be digested, processed, and filtered through the American philosophy. This is the sun in Cancer, because Mercury is moving back into Cancer, and then put forth in a more digestible, in a more practical manner, rather than just, you know, like I said, that checkmate mental kind of attempt at victory, essentially. Okay, how does that play out? Could this have something to do with Iran or you know, another situation? We don't know. This is all speculation, but that energy is certainly brewing right now. And for all of us, we can look at our own charts and see where that is and where that's gonna play out. Anyway, so that's also brewing here this summer, in addition to the disclosure and zealotry of the whole year. And now these eclipses, which, like I said, are a precursor to what's happening in 2020, when Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto join each other in Capricorn. Now, just to go back a bit, if you've seen any of my videos over the last several years, I've talked about Pluto in Capricorn quite a bit. Okay, Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008. It spends about 16 years in each sign, so it's still there. It'll be there to about 2024, 2025. Okay, this is also where Pluto was. The last time Pluto was in Capricorn, I should say, is when the United States of America was born. So on July 4th, 1776, Pluto is in late Capricorn. In fact, Pluto will be back to that point in the chart for the first time since then, here in 2022, 2023. So we're only a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years, however you want to calculate that, away from the Pluto return for the United States. Okay, and every time Pluto goes through Capricorn, so the last time being 1762, I think, to 1778, this was when the American Revolution happened. Every time it happens, something very revolutionary does occur in terms of power in the world, in terms of governance, how things are governed. So things essentially were starting at that point to switch from these feudal systems, kings and queens, and etc., and peasants and whatever, to this idea of liberty, which, you know, in my opinion, hasn't completely manifested itself totally here, even though we're celebrating 4th of July here in the U.S. and everything. It's sort of the idea of America that we're celebrating, not the practice, in my opinion, because it hasn't quite panned out yet, but it's never too late, right? But anyway, the idea was born at that time. And that was that Pluto and Capricorn shift then. The prior one before that was in the early 1500s. This is when Martin Luther pinned the note on the door of the Catholic Church, and this was the start of the Protestant Reformation, and it hasn't been the same since. I mean, the Catholic Church ruled for 1500 years, and suddenly it changed in a blink of an eye, and suddenly for the last 500 years or so, it's been, you know, more Protestant dominated in lots of different denominations, etc. Okay, and so big changes happened, just like big changes happened with the American Revolution. That sparked the French Revolution, which sparked other, you know, revolutions, etc. And so it doesn't end in the era. It begins in the era and then ripples out. And we're in one of these Pluto and Capricorn periods since 2008. Right when Pluto entered Capricorn, the economy, especially in the US, tanked quite a bit because there's a readjustment happening right now and for the next several years as this finishes up. In my opinion, I've expressed it in previous videos, this kind of structure that's breaking down, that's transforming, is the global monetary system, in my opinion. Okay, I could be wrong, but it feels like there is something really reorganizing and transforming on that level. Okay, and so you can think of this energy it's been building for a long time. Saturn has not been in Capricorn since the late 80s. It's been in Capricorn the last year and a half now. But last time it was in Capricorn was in the late 80s. This is when the Berlin Wall fell. This is, this was the precursor to the fall of essentially the Cold War as we know it. Okay, and so another signifier of change, etc. Okay, now Jupiter is in Capricorn a little more often, every 12 years or so. So last time it was in Capricorn was about 2007, 2008, just before Pluto entered Capricorn. So we haven't had these three all in Capricorn and all together in the same zone in I don't even know how many years. I haven't looked into it to look back to it, but it's been a long time. Okay, and so it's a very significant time. Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter all together in late Capricorn, just before the Pluto return for the US. That's not a small thing. And it's also an election year in the US in 2020. So these eclipses are right in that energy area of Cancer, Capricorn, okay? And that's why I want to bring it up, because like this, for example, this eclipse we just had on Tuesday, July 2nd, this one opposed Saturn in Capricorn, okay? There it is. And the eclipse coming up here July 16th will conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. So it's connecting the Saturn and Pluto before they're technically together, which they will be in January. But before they're together technically, we've got only about 6 months away. This is a precursor for it, right? And we're gonna have another set of eclipses right around that time, just before that time. So you can see this window opening, this sort of this hint of change, this hint of transformation. And what does that mean exactly? Your guess is as good as mine. But we know we're in it. We know we're in a major period of transformation and change. And you know, a big part of it is what's happening in 2019, the disclosure, the zealotry. I think lots of things are coming out this year, and it's going to change things. It's going to change how governance is structured, okay? I think lots of corruption is going to come out. I mean, everyone wants to point their finger at Trump, you know, and they don't, you know, it's not necessarily based on bad reasoning, but in my opinion, Trump is an amalgamation of every leader that ever came before him during this era of Regulus in Leo. I've talked about Trump's chart before. You can see videos of that as well. Trump, born with Regulus in Leo rising, 29 degrees Leo, he sort of represents the Regulus in Leo style of leadership, which is dying because Regulus has entered Virgo. And so someone has to come in and soak it all up. And so he's getting the finger pointed at him. And again, it's not without due cause, but the reality is these fingers could have been pointed at every leader. And so it's sort of this eruption of anger within people for centuries worth of resentment toward leadership that couldn't be expressed, that's being expressed now. And so someone like Trump, he's got to have a strong spirit to handle this. Most people couldn't handle the amount of distaste and you know, just negative energy toward themselves. Could you imagine if you had the kind of negative energy that he has toward him to live your daily life and have it pretty much not faze you? That, you know, judge him how you will, but that shows a strong spirit on a certain level, okay? He's taking a lot of the brunt. He is the scapegoat for centuries of disagreement and dissent and resentment toward leadership in general. So if you can view it through that lens, it might make you see things a little differently. So he's essentially, it's like the tailpipe of all that has happened in the engine before him. And he's getting the brunt and the finger pointed for things that every other leader has done. But he's getting pointed out for it. because the media has turned on him. And you have to go back into the history of the media and its true intentions, etc. And what they're really trying to do is to get the masses into infantile emotional responses for better control, for better opportunities to throw new regulations out there and have people accept it. It's a method that's been working for decades, since people like Edward Bernays, who was Sigmund Freud's nephew, started employing a lot of propaganda, which is what he used the word propaganda in his book, and it wasn't even the word that we see it as today. It was different. It was sort of okay to stir public opinion in certain directions for certain intentions back then. Now we kind of see it as sinister, but it's been going on for a long time. And so it isn't necessarily what the media is making us want to focus on and react to. It's that they want us reacting to something. And Trump is perfect for that. He's perfect for that. It was well known that there was a lot of distaste for him, and so he's just a perfect puppet for the media to garner collective emotional loosh, as some people call it, and that allows the powers that be to stay in power. But with these eclipses in the Capricorn Cancer zone and the Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto connection coming up here in 2020, this is symbolically the end of the road for the old guard. Okay, the old guard, and this has nothing to do with the Democrats beating the Republicans in 2020 or something like that, because it's all the same old BS on both sides. Okay, it's the end of that BS itself, and we're entering a new realm of that. As sovereign beings, we don't need leaders in the way that we might have needed them prior to certain technological developments. With current technological developments, we can order and structure government in very different ways that require much less hands-on, much less public funds, and much less opportunities for lobbying, and by having representatives from many parts of one nation all in one area in Washington, D.C. Why not have everyone in their jurisdiction that they represent? And they can't be colluding as often, and it's harder for lobbyists to influence people that are not right in front of them in groups, because it's the group mentality that allows things to push. If it's a one-on-one, people have a much higher ability to maintain their sovereign authority. It's when we get into the peer pressure of groups, and this is known again by the psychologists and psychiatrists going back to Edward Bernays and the beginning of the media, and why the media is what it is, and why TV was essentially promoted and put forth in the 1950s. And this is known that it's easier to influence groups than it is to influence individuals. And when we start identifying with groups, which is what is happening a lot now too, this identification, this victim identity as well. My identity, whatever thing I identify with, is more victimized than what you identify with, and therefore we deserve more. And that just plays into that as well. Building group identities to put forth ideas easier, but also in the process creating further and further division, separation consciousness. And the reality is we can separate ourselves right down to the individuals, and that's really where we should be focusing. That's the essence of liberty, going back to it being the 4th of July and everything. The essence of liberty is your sovereignty, the ability to be an individual, not have to be influenced by the group, and to maintain your authority despite overwhelming consensus of a group, right? If it is right, it is right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. It's data and facts that support that. It isn't popular opinion, and this is something that's been corrupting science, etc. And so going back to the idea of corruption in politics, corruption in science, corruption all around, coming out. It's a big part of this year, still happening, and these eclipses are the crack that's going to open up, and it's going to allow for that new foundation to be built. Will we, and it's the question mark, will we, moving forward through the 2020s, will we start to honor our sovereignty? Will we stop allowing ourselves to be led in ways that are not in the best interest of the individual sovereign beings? And that's a question that remains to be seen. So long as we can be kept in infantile emotional responses, upset about something or someone, we're under control. And waking up to that is a huge huge step. And so I think that's all I have today. But anyway, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I know I rambled on a little bit there. And if you agree, disagree, don't matter. That's the whole idea of being a sovereign being with your own authority. Okay? But I think it's very intense and interesting times right now. Just remember, any strong felt ideas, that lion inside of us that wants to express over the next week or two, try to make sure we are coming from our hearts, and be patient. Around Labor Day, it's going to feel much more logical as far as how we can channel that. Okay? If we're patient, that's going to be that Mercury retrograde. And these eclipses just allow those windows to open. Allow our eyes to open, allow our ears to open. Just because we've always held to certain beliefs and relied on certain structures to always be there, doesn't mean they're always going to be there. It doesn't mean that we ever needed them to be there to stand on our own feet. And that's a big part of this energy shift as we enter the next several months to several years, is landing on our own feet and realizing that, that man behind the curtain essentially never really was helping us and probably hindering us more. And so it's a time to take another rung of evolution, like the last Pluto in Capricorn, and leap up another level of liberty. And that's kind of how these things work. We'll see what happens when Pluto joins where the natal Pluto for the U.S. was in 2022, 2023. Whoever's the president next could still be Trump, or it could be whoever wins in 2020. That person will be president during that time. So it's an interesting time to live in. And I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at how things unfold and what realizations occur in our own lives. So anyway, happy 4th of July, and I will check in with you again at some point here in the near future, probably by the end of the summer. Do reach out though, Christopher Taylor, Saturn and Pluto. You can reach me through YouTube here below, Facebook, and if you're interested in any kind of personal astrology readings, I'm available for those as well. All right, we'll see you again. Thanks a lot.